Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what cross him.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is, let's see, it is Tuesday, March 11, 2025, and I'm going to be taking you guys through Micah. If you remember, we finished up our Isaiah coverage, I guess, but we've got that broken up into the stuff that speaks to the coming of the Assyrian invasion leading up to Hezekiah, and then what came after that, which is going to be the coming of the Babylonian invasion. Well, Micah is going to be parallel with much of Hezekiah. As you see, it says, the word of the Lord came to Micah the Morashite in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. If you remember, Jotham would have co-ruled with Uzziah and probably had some rule on his own, but it's not exactly clear where that break is. If we assume that Jotham ruled the entire time that they say in Kings and Chronicles after Uzziah was dead, that would make Isaiah's prophesying alone being over 70 years. I think it might even be up to 90 years. So it seems to be a stretch. So there seems to be some overlap there for all of Isaiah's stuff to fit. And of course, Jotham, if he's counting this, he is roughly contemporary with Isaiah. But Isaiah would have started before him. So technically, his prophesying is going to come in the days of the Assyrian invasion, and then speak to Babylon 2 as well as Isaiah, but he's just 7 chapters, and since we don't have clear chapter breaks, I'm going to do my best to guess what came before the Assyrian invasion, which is going to take away northern Israel, and then what speaks to the Babylonian invasion. So think of them roughly around that time, but you see Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. If he started prophesying, like if any of this book, or it might not even be the book, it could be like he started prophesying and then this book was written later. His prophecy begins in Jotham. If you remember, that takes you almost back to the beginning of the book of Isaiah, because it starts out in the year Uzziah died, being like, I want to say the 3rd or 4th chapter. So he's going to stretch almost parallel to Isaiah if you take the whole thing into account. It's just a much shorter prophecy. So if you see, it says what she saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem, that means he has to have started before Samaria was taken into captivity. So we're just going to walk through this and kind of line it up to Isaiah as best as we can. And I'm going to put all of this in the coming of the Babylonian captivity or the fall of Judah, just because he speaks to the fall of Judah, and it's too short for me to split into 2 videos and put it in 2 different places. So maybe I'll put it in both lists. Who knows? We'll see. Anyways, he says, hear all ye people, hearken, O Lord, and all that is therein is, and let the Lord be witness against you for the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, the Lord comes forth out of his place and will come down and tread on the high places of the earth. So obviously we know this speaks to the second coming of Christ, but as a foretype to this, you got to remember the Lord is at the head of these armies and they are his instrument. And so in that sense, you could say, well, there's a foretyping of this in these coming Assyrian and Babylonian invasions. In this context, the Assyrian, but it's really about the second coming of the Lord, because you see he treads in the high places of the earth. Remember, the Lord is going to cause the mountains to melt and all that stuff, and he's going to come down out of his place, and that is in Hosea after 2 days. So we know that's been established already, so we don't need to be confused about that. Hosea would have prophesied roughly a generation before him. So his word from the Lord would have been established by the time he's saying this. And then he says, the mountains will be molten under him, the valleys shall be cleft and wax before his fire, and the waters are poured down in the steep place. So if you remember, he's going to touch down the Mount of Olives, it's going to split. He's also going to do some stuff that's terraforming, but it seems like mountains just melt in front of him rather than him having to hike up a mountain. It says, for the transgression of Jacob is all this, and for the sin of the house of Israel. So notice he's saying Jacob, that's Israel after flesh. Israel could be national Israel, or it could be the church. But this is probably the believing remnant of Israel that is saved, because they do have sins, and yet they are ultimately going to be saved. So it says, what is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what are the high places of Judah? Are they not Jerusalem? So obviously Samaria is where you're going to have the Baal worship previously, but it's ultimately where their kings who are in rebellion against God are, and the kings of Jerusalem are, or Judah are in Jerusalem. So it says, therefore I will make Samaria as a heap of a field, as a planting of a vineyard, and I will pour down the stones thereof into the valley, and I will discover the foundations thereof. So the reference to this is really about Assyria taking down and burning Samaria, discovering its foundations, meaning it's going to be razed down to its foundations. And all the graven image thereof will be beaten to pieces, and the hires thereof will be burned with fire, and all the idols thereof I will lay desolate. For she gathered it of the hire of a harlot, and shall return to the hire of a harlot. So it's not going to be the Assyrians that necessarily do this. Now, they're going to somewhat do it because they're going to raise this. But if you remember way back in Kings, you had the prophecy about a king from Jerusalem named Josiah, who was going to destroy their altars and burn them to ash and all this stuff. So that is going to happen actually after Samaria is destroyed by Assyria, but before Jerusalem is taken captivity to Babylon. So if you remember, Assyria kind of leaves Jerusalem alone after that. And so what Jerusalem is going to do is largely reconquer the areas around Samaria, and then they're going to basically rule over them, and they're going to destroy all their idols. So that's going to be like that one good last gasp of goodness in the days of Josiah before Jerusalem falls apart. So then he says, therefore I will wail and howl, I will go stripped and naked, I will make wailing like the dragons and mourning as the owls. This is weird because it says the Lord will wail and howl, the Lord will go stripped and naked. He's saying, I will make a wailing like the dragons and a mourning as the owls. So it sounds like there's stuff that's going on. It's almost like God is talking about Israel as himself. Because remember, God is Israel, and so is the nation of Israel, and they are like a foretype of the body of Christ. So it sounds like everything that they're going to go through, he is saying, I will. I'm going to look at some other translations. Let's see. He says, because of this I must lament and wail, I must go barefoot and naked, I must lament like the jackals and mourn like the ostriches. So it does sound that way. I will lament and wail. So it's almost like the Lord is speaking beforehand as if he's the Lord taking on their sin. That's how I'm going to understand that. So, and then he says, for her wound is incurable, for it has come up to Judah. He has come to the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. So he's saying her wound, and I would assume that would be Samaria. Samaria's wound has come up to the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. So what they're saying is the Baal worship of the Samaritans, or the kings of Israel in Samaria, has come up into Jerusalem, and obviously that comes in probably through Athaliah, and then you're going to have that being a thing, I think, in the days of Ahaz, but definitely in the days of Manasseh. So he's seeing the possibility of all of Israel being corrupted, like, or all of Judah being corrupted like Israel is corrupted, and so he is cutting off the gangrenous leg, if you will. He says her wound is incurable before the whole body is destroyed. So think of God as speaking to Israel and Judah like his own body, almost as like a foretype of the church. So then he says, declare it not to Gath, weep ye not at all, for the house of Arapah will roll thyself in the dust. The house of Arapah, what is that? Ascalon doesn't say. I don't know the house of Arapah. I've never heard of that before. I mean, I've read it before, but I've never really researched it and found out what that is. So let's see. Beth Arapah is an unidentified town. House of dust, it could mean. Let's see, what does Arapah mean? So apparently the two words that Arapah could mean, and again, we can't identify the town, but it could mean house of like a feminized version. Remember, Samaria is called a she, so it could be a feminized version of the term broken neck or beheaded. So the beheaded house, in other words, a house without a head, which could be a representation of them having no legitimate king anymore. Or it could be this Araphel And in Hebrew, the P and the PH letter are the same letter. They just have like a dot underneath them, so that you can distinguish the F or the P sound. There's no letter F. There's like a PH and a P. Think of it like that. And so this word, if you remember that these originals didn't have those dots on them, this word could be ara. Oh, I don't know if that RFL works though for afra, because the R is here. I don't know if that works with the Hebrew for how. I don't think they would transliterate it like that. But it could mean thick darkness or gloom, which is a type of hell. Remember the outer darkness and thick darkness, and God dwells in thick darkness. So he says, declare it not in Gath, weep ye not at all. In the house of Apharah, roll thyself in the dust. So it just could be some unnamed town that we don't really know the meaning of. It doesn't seem to be a normal Hebrew word that is basically in the region that probably is long gone, and so we don't know what they're talking about. Then he says, pass ye away, you inhabitant of Saphir, having thy shame naked. The inhabitant of Zanan came forth unto the morning of Beth-Hazel. He shall receive of you his standing. I don't know what any of these cities are. I've never, and let's see if they're in other places. So that's kind of interesting to have these cities that, of all the other books of the Bible that are around this, these names aren't repeated. So you inhabitant of Saphir, you inhabitant of Zanan, the morning of Beth-Hazel. I don't know what these are. These might be like the towns that the people came from before Samaria became a great city, and that's who the population of Samaria is. That's a possibility. But these cities are not really attested anywhere else, so who knows? So then he says, the inhabitant of Maroth waited carefully for good, but evil came down from the Lord unto the gate of Jerusalem. So this is Maroth, and that is another one that we don't seem to see anywhere else. You can see if these words are used anywhere else in the Bible, and it's not. It's the only place it's used. So whoever these are, these could be people from small towns that are long since gone, but maybe they fled to Jerusalem and Samaria for safety before they were destroyed. That's not really clear to me. So let's see. He says, but evil came down from the Lord unto the gate of Jerusalem. So in other words, all the way to Jerusalem with the Assyrians coming, it came anyways. He says, you inhabitant of Lachish. Lachish I know. Bind the chariot to the swift beast. She is the beginning of sin of the daughter of Zion, for the transgressions of Israel were found in thee. So Lachish, let's see, is the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem. So that's where he's coming from when he goes up to fight Hezekiah. So he is going to take Lachish before they attack Jerusalem itself. It says, bind the chariot to the swift beast. She is the beginning of the sin of the daughter of Zion. So typically the daughter of Zion is going to be Jerusalem. And the swift beast, it says, she is the beginning of sin. For the transgressions of Israel were found in thee. So the transgression of Israel, I would assume, is going to be Baal worship. I would assume if you're looking at a swift beast, that might be like a bull. And that bull god could be the Apis bull. And that might be... That may be what is being transported from Israel to Jerusalem as what they're worshiping. So then he says, therefore shalt thou give presents to Moresheth Gath. The houses of Akzib shall be a lie to the kings of Israel. So I believe these are Philistines here. And then he says, yet I will bring an heir to thee, O inhabitant of Mareshah. He shall come to Adullam, the glory of Israel. So what is this Mareshah? So Mareshah is actually mentioned in, so we have Maroth, Moresheth Gath, so that's Moreshah. So Moresheth Gath seems to be a merger of Gath and Moreshah, which is kind of weird. It's like a marriage of Moreshah and Gath. Let's see this. So we see in Joseph, we have... the inheritance of the tribe of Judah, and Moresheth seems to be a part of that. Mareshah. This is Achzib and Mareshah, 9 cities with their villages, and these would be near the Philistine cities. So it's weird that you have Moresheth Gath, because remember how we said Ashtoreth seems to be like, Ashtoreth seems to be married to a star, which might be a star, or Astar, whatever that is. Well, here we have Moresheth Gath, which seems to be the marriage of this city of Mareshah. Therefore, give presents to Moresheth Gath, and maybe it's coming under the protection of these Philistines. The house of Achzib will be a lie to the kings of Israel, so maybe they're giving them tribute to basically say protect them, because Jerusalem can't protect them. And he says, "Yet I will bring an heir to thee, O inhabitant of Mareshah, and he will come unto Adullam, the glory of Israel." So Christ never went to that region, which makes me wonder who is the one who's coming there. Well, maybe that's Philip, the evangelist, who eventually goes through that region with the gospel. That could be it. And he says he will come to Adullam, the glory of Israel, because he goes through that region on that highway between Jerusalem going down into Egypt, and then he goes up into Azotus, which is one of the 5 Philistine cities. So then he says, "Make thee bald and pull thee for thy delicate children, enlarge thy baldness as the eagle." So the bald eagle, for they are gone into captivity from thee. So all of this is basically summarizing the invasion of Assyria, taking of Samaria, chasing all these cities around. And probably if you were local to that region at that time, this would have made a lot more sense. But because most of these cities aren't prominent throughout the Bible, we don't know what they are today. So if you want to remember when the Assyrian invasion came, what they're going to do, what Assyria is going to do first before they go up to Jerusalem is try, because they're actually pretty friendly with Egypt, then Egypt kind of turns on them, and then they depose, or they get rid of the king of Egypt and replace him with a Cushite. But in those early times, in the beginning, what they're going to do is they're going to go around and take these lowlands first, because you remember Samaria and Judea are both in mountains, and so they're going to go around and take these lowlands first, and then you're going to have Azotus, I believe, is a Greek name for Ashdod. So what you're going to have is the General Tartar, or whatever his name was. He's going to take Azotus, and what you're going to have is Egyptians kind of having some sort of alliance with these lower Philistine cities, but he's starting to take the northern Philistine cities. And then from there, he's going to take Ephraim. He's going to start to take all the surrounding lowlands of Judah and Philistia. And then he's going to finally go up to Jerusalem and try to take that. And so that's kind of where he gets stopped. And so he's going to take most of these lowlands, and you just want to think of most of these places probably in the surrounding lowlands of Samaria and the Judean highlands. Okay, think of all this as mountain, and these as the lowlands. So I don't have a lot of insight there. I'm just giving you historical speculation. But he says, "Woe to them who devise iniquity, who work evil on their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is the power of their hand. And they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. And so they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. Therefore thus saith the Lord, Behold, against this family I do devise an evil, from which you shall not remove your necks, neither shall you go haughtily, for the time is evil. In that day shall one take up a parable against you, and lament with a doleful lamentation, and say, We be utterly spoiled. He has changed the portion of my people, how he has removed it from me. Turning away, he has divided our fields." So this is just what God said he was going to do if they would follow other gods. He says, "Therefore thou shalt have none that shall cast a cord by lot in the congregation of the Lord." I don't know what casting a cord by lot is. Maybe it could be some form of family justice practice of saying you're putting the cord representing your family in, and then they're taking lots to make a judgment. I don't know. He says, "Prophesy ye not, say to them that prophesy, they shall prophesy to them. Say they to them that prophesy, they shall not prophesy to them, that they shall not take shame." So is he saying prophecy to them not? Like, I'm not prophesying to you anymore. Like maybe Micah is the last prophet that Samaria gets. You're not going to get any more warnings. You're done. O thou that art named the house of Jacob, so that'd be northern Israel typically, is the spirit of the Lord straitened? Are these his doings? Do not my words do good to him that walks uprightly? Even of late my people is risen up as an enemy. You pull off the robe with the garment from them that pass securely, as men averse from war. The women of my people have ye cast out of their pleasant houses. From their children you have taken away my glory forever. So who is he saying he's doing that? He's saying the house of Jacob, the spirit of the Lord, they're his doings, and he's doing it. So it's weird because he's saying, my people is taken away, but who is he saying is taken away? He's saying the spirit of the Lord is taken away. So it seems like the prophet is saying that. Even of late, my people is risen up as an enemy. You pull off the robe of the garment. So the prophet is prophesying that the spirit of the Lord is against them. And then he says, arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest, because it is polluted. It shall destroy you even with a sore destruction. It says, if a man walking in the spirit of falsehood do lie, saying, I will prophesy unto thee of wine and of strong drink, he shall even be a prophet of his people. So what are they saying? One of the ways that prophets would prophesy is to get drunk or get high. If you remember when Joseph was considered to have powers of divination in Egypt, and he had a cup of wine, they would say his wine is the cup of his divination, the cup he uses to divine. So in other words, you might have wine mixed with harder liquor or hardened, wine that is stronger, or maybe have other drugs in it, and then you're using it, and as you're intoxicated, inebriated, you're spiritually loose, and you're getting stuff from the spirit world. And they're saying this is how they're trying to get prophets to prophecy, because they're done. God's done sending legit prophets to them, and there's no more repentance for them. They're done. So he says, I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all thee, and I will surely gather the remnant of Israel, and I will gather them as the sheep of Basra, and the flock in the midst of the fold, and I'll make a great noise by reason of the multitude of men. The breaker has come up before them, they have broken up, they have passed through the gate, and they are gone out of it, and their king shall pass over them, and the Lord on the head of them. So this is something that's different. Remember how he is saying some stuff in the beginning of this prophecy that speaks to the Lord at his second coming. Okay, well now this is also speaking to the Lord at his second coming. So he says, I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. Now this doesn't happen in the days of Assyria, but something like this is going to happen in the last days. And what's going to happen? Well, the kings of the east are actually going to come up to Jerusalem. They're actually going to take part of it, and they're going to be trapped. And it looks like they're being besieged, and there's going to be nowhere to go. And then the Lord's going to touch down on the Mount of Olives, split the mountain into, and open up a ravine for them to escape to Basra in. So he says, if a man walking in the spirit, so it's almost like this is another prophecy. You see a paragraph symbol here. So they're talking about the false prophets, and now seems to be another prophecy. And he says, I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together as the sheep of Basra. So that's the city where Job ruled over. And then he says, as a flock in the midst of fold, they will make a great noise by reason of the multitude of men. So in other words, this flock, which is a third of Israel as its remnant, because as Israel is being besieged and invaded by the kings of the east, people are going to be pulling back to Jerusalem as the place of refuge. And of course, you're going to have the Antichrist armies are going to be down here in the Gaza region, because they're going to come up from Egypt, and these guys are going to come down from here, and then they're eventually going to make peace and all gather against the Lord at Armageddon. That's where the Lord destroys him. But before that, you're going to have him setting up his he comes up from Egypt, and it says he sets up his tabernacles between the sea and the holy mountain. So that's where he is. He obviously still has Jerusalem defended, but the armies are going to be stationed in the lowlands here, because you're going to have huge armies, and it's going to be too big to have all these people packed in Jerusalem. And so they're fighting down here in the lowlands, or holding that. Maybe they've got missile defense and missile shields and whatever. And then these guys are attacking from up here, probably in Megiddo, probably in the Armageddon region, that great valley over there. And then they actually get to the point where they've taken half of Jerusalem. And it says that half of the people will be taken captive, or a third will be taken captive, a third will be killed, and the last third will be refined through the fire. This is all going to be in Zechariah that we'll get into later. And so what you have happen is the faithful Jews who know this is the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel, they're going to flee at the moment it happens to Basra. But then there's going to be a bunch of Jews who don't flee. And it's kind of like how you have the Christians that are watching and they get raptured. The Jews that are watching flee. Okay, those are parallel. The Christians who aren't watching get beheaded for not taking the mark of the beast. And the Jews that are not watching are going to be decimated down to a third of them. And then that third, God's going to have mercy on them. And when he touches down at the Mount of Olives, this is the last of the 7 bowls, he is going to split open the city at the east gate, which is going to allow them to flee through a ravine like this, like in the days of an earthquake in Uzziah, apparently. And then they're going to gather with those others in Basra, and the Lord is going to be at the head of him. And when he gets to Basra, he is going to be fighting. That's where he gets his coat covered with blood, if you remember that from Isaiah, because you're going to have these other armies that are going to come from. If you knew this, if you have my Revelation book, this is illustrated for you. But you essentially have right now you have Turkey walled off, and you're going to have the Tigris and Euphrates River probably deepen when the whole earth has an earth shake, because all their dams are going to be broken, and so you're going to have a deep Euphrates River again. And so that's going to be kind of the border. But when the Euphrates River dries, what you're going to have is these armies from the east pour over, and you're going to have contingents of people who are from the Medes or Kurds, and from, it looks like, the Ukrainians and the Georgians, because the other people seem to be connected to Turkey and they're friendly, but these guys are going to come around, and it seems like they're going to attack Neam, and then when they're done attacking Neam, they're going to head up through the region of Basra. If you see where Selah is here, Basra's probably around here, and I know my pointer is really small, but Basra's around here, just kind of east of the southern end of the Dead Sea. And they're going to be coming up here because you don't want to march through the Negev to get to Jerusalem. That's just like 50 miles of hot desert. Like you don't want to do that, right? You want to go up around the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, through Jericho, the same way the Jews came in, and then up into Jerusalem that way. And so they're going to have to go through the place where these Jews are gathered. Well, Christ is going to be leading these people down there, and when he gets there, he is going to personally slaughter all these armies who are coming up to fight against Jerusalem from the south. Because there are going to be all kinds of people. Like the whole world is going to be against the Antichrist before Christ gets there. And then they're going to switch and be toward the Antichrist against Christ. So then he says the breaker has come up before him. So he's called the breaker because he breaks the wall open. And he says they have broken up. They have passed through the gate. That's the east gate. That's the one that's walled up right now if you ever get a picture of Jerusalem. And they are gone out by it. And their king shall pass before them, the Lord on the head of them. So this is the Lord physically present on the earth passing down before them. Then he says, and I said, hear, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, and ye princes of the house of Israel, is it not for you to know judgment? So it's weird that these prophecies are going back and forth between the second coming of the Lord and between this is ancient Assyrian invasion. Because if I'm getting this prophecy, I'm a little confused. If I'm getting all this stuff back in the day, I'm very confused. It sounds like the Lord's going to save us at the last minute. Well, he does save Jerusalem at the last minute, if you remember. Now, the whole breaking and the breaker going forth before him is kind of hard to understand. But if you understand, he breaks the siege of Jerusalem by sending the angel to slaughter like 180,000 men. So in that sense, he's the breaker of the siege. In the last days, he's going to be the breaker of the wall. And the Basra thing has no relation to what happens in Jerusalem or Samaria. So he says, and I said, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, O you princes of the house of Israel, is it not for you to know judgment? In other words, shouldn't you know better? You have the scriptures, you have the law. Who hate the good, who love the evil, who pluck off their skin from them and their flesh from off their bones. In other words, you're dying, you're wasting away, but what's happening? Remember, they're like a body. Who also eat the flesh of my people and flay their skin from off them and break their bones and chop them in pieces as for the pot, as the flesh of the cauldron. So what is happening? Well, they're doing this in the siege. But it is a reflection of what they're doing all the time in biting and devouring one another and taking advantage of another and mistreating one another. So then he says, then shall they cry to the Lord, but he will not hear them. So then in the siege, he will even hide his face from them at that time, as they have behaved themselves ill in their doing. So in other words, just like he says, in the last days, I'm going to give you blood to drink, like the blood of the prophets you've shed. Well, they have been, the rich have been mistreating the poor and the widow, and everyone's been destroying and devouring them. In other words, taking all their belongings and their land and stuff like that and enslaving them. And so they're getting the recompense for that, which is fine. You want to eat and devour the poor among you? I'm going to besiege you until you're eating and devouring people. How's that? So then he says, thus saith the Lord concerning the prophets that do make my people heirs. So they've got false prophets. Remember, they've got these priests of Baal, and then they probably have prophets who are related to, you remember how they've always had these gainsaying prophets who surround Ahab and others and tell them what they want to hear. You probably always had this related to their Apis bull or their two golden calves that they're worshiping in Dan and Bethel. You probably, the Baal cult was destroyed in the days of Jehu, but you probably have remnants of something like that still going on. So then he says, that bite was in their teeth and cry peace, and he that putteth not their mouths, they shall prepare a war against them. Let's see what he's saying. The prophets make my people err that bite with their teeth and cry peace. Peace. They bite with their teeth and cry peace. And he that putteth not into their mouths, in other words, God hasn't put these words in their mouths, they even prepare war against him. And he that putteth not into their mouth, they even prepare war against him. So in other words, they're even fighting against the Lord who did not put these words in their mouth. That's what it's saying. So he's saying, therefore night shall be unto you, that you shall not have a vision, and it shall be dark unto you, that you shall not divine. And the sun shall go down over the prophets, and the day shall be dark over them. In other words, they're not going to be able to say anything. God is going to bind them even from receiving their false prophecies. Then shall the seers be ashamed, and the diviners confounded. Yea, they shall cover up their lips, for there is no answer of God. So these people who are supposedly, they're divining by probably the golden calves and whatnot, they're getting no answers. No answers. He's going to make them ashamed, like they've got no answers. These people, the last thing they're going to see before their city is destroyed and they're taken into captivities is you utterly failing them as, giving the word of the Lord to them. But I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord, but truly I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord and of judgment and of might, to declare unto Jacob his transgression and to Israel his sin. So this sounds like this is Micah talking. I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord and of judgment and of might, to declare Jacob's transgression and Israel his sin. So notice how he said, hear ye heads of Israel, you princes, is it not for you to know judgment? But at the end he's saying, but truly I am full of power by the Spirit. So let's see where Micah's from. He says he's from Moreshite. So if you remember, Moresheth, he's a Moreshite. Mareshah, Moresheth, Gath, seems to be a place that is near Gaza. So let's see where Moreshah is. No, it's closer to Lachish. Oh yeah, here's Gath right here. Here's Moreshah. So he is from the Judah region. But if you remember, Assyria is coming around here and taking southern Philistine cities before they go up and take Samaria. The reason they're doing this is because if you're besieging a city and that city is defending you and you've got to basically surround it really heavily, the last thing you want is somebody potentially attacking you from your back. Because what they could do is they could be disrupting your supply lines, which you need to maintain your own lines, or they could be breaking the siege on one end and allowing for these people to serve as pretty much a never-ending defense against you, so they can keep getting stronger over here while your city is essentially the shield between this major force ever coming to you. And so what they do is they come down and they take these cities first. And see, so there's Mareshah and there's Maresheth Gath. This is why they think, so notice there's a question mark here. Here's Gath and here's Mareshah. So Maresheth Gath might be a city that is right between the two. And that's why it's called Maresheth Gath. It could literally be a city of Philistines of Gath and Judahites of Maresheth, who have married together or congregated together or trade together in the town at the cross section. If you see these different roads here, could be called Maresheth Gath. That's their guess. And it's not a bad guess, I think. Well, this Mareshah is where Micah is from. So he's from the land of Judah, but he's privy to the goings on because the Assyrian armies are coming down here ultimately in their conquest to take Samaria. Now, they're not even after Egypt yet. They're not even after these other Philistine cities yet. But one of them, I think, was paying tribute to them, and then they rebelled. And I think that city and these Gazans and the Sumerians thought that Egypt was going to back them up if they stood their ground against Assyria, and that was going to be their hope. And Egypt is going to basically kind of back down on them, and then they're going to get their butts kicked. So Micah's coming from here. He is prophesying to people up here. If you see, there's Bethlehem up here and Hebron down here. You're going to go further north and see Jerusalem, and then further than that, if you remember all the maps that we've covered, is going to be Bethel and then Samaria up in the hills. So just want to make sure we had some context. Now he says, so he's full of power to declare to Jacob's transgression, Israel's sin. So he's prophesying against northern Israel first. And then he says, hear this, I pray you, the heads of the house of Jacob, the princes of the house of Israel that abhor judgment and pervert all iniquity. They build up Zion with blood and Jerusalem with iniquity. So he seems to be very clear that it's northern Israel that is perverting and corrupting Jerusalem, which makes sense because the house of Ahab married into it. And it seems like they're getting the false gods that came in through Israel and now are into Jerusalem. Jerusalem still had the high places, but that was more like they're offering up incense to Yahweh at these high places that the Canaanites used, and they're not so much using Canaanite idols, but the Israelites are using Canaanite idols and the Apis bowl, which seems to be, it honestly seems to be a version of Marduk and the Apis bowl of Egypt, because Marduk is Amar, which means young bull, and Utu, which is the Sumerian sun god, and this Apis bull is a young bull, a calf with a sun disk over its head. So they seem to be versions of the same thing, a merger of the sun god and the bull god, basically. So think of it as like a merger of the father of the Nephilim with the Utu, which was their in their ancient pagan belief system represented Yahweh, basically. And so this, you can see this, and this is why the Jews are adopting these things, because what you probably have, just like today, is people saying, oh yeah, you just call that God that, but it's the same God that we worship. And they're like, oh, well, we should intermarry. Yeah. And then we should call our God a hyphenated name when we'll call him Yahweh Allah. If we start, intermingling with Muslims too much, we'll call our God Yahweh Allah. We'll call him Jesus Allah or Yahweh Baal or whatever. And this is what they would do. So he's like, they build up Zion with blood and Jerusalem with iniquity, the heads thereof for a reward, and the priests thereof teach for hire, and the prophets thereof divine for money. So in other words, they're all a bunch of televangelists. They're in it for the munties. They are not really giving you the word of the Lord. They're in it for the munties. They're going to tell you what it takes to get you to sow a seed into their ministry. They will lean upon the Lord and say, is not the Lord among us? None evil can come upon us. So what are they going to say? I'm a king's kid. I am naming and proclaiming that COVID be gone. Poof. They're doing all that nonsense. Therefore shall Zion for your sake be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountain and the house is the high places in the forest. So what is you saying? Well, we've got Yahweh's temple here. There's no way they're going to get us. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. And they've been fine for a long time. Jerusalem has never been sacked. It has been breached. The wall has been breached. We have Egypt coming up and taking a tribute later on. You're going to have northern Israel break a chunk of the wall, and they seem to go in and pillage it real quick and leave. But you never have it besieged and taken away from the Jews or destroyed or anything like that. So they've got a lot of pride in the city, like God's protecting it because his temple's there. He says, but in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and the people shall flow into it. Wait a minute. In the last days it shall be established on the top of the mountains. It's still there. What do you mean in the last days it will be established on the top of the mountains? It's still there. Yeah, it's going down. It's going down. Twice, actually. It's going to go down in the days of Babylon. Then it's going to go down again in the days of Titus, the Roman. But these two things are going to have a typology of each other. They're going to be similar because it's ultimately leading to the Babylonian captivity, which is a dual fulfillment. It has the 70 years in literal Babylon and the 70 weeks of years under captivity to the Gentiles, where the king of Babylon is an epithet for Satan, who rules over the nations. God rules over Israel, Satan rules over the nations. And so it's going to reflect both the 70 years in Babylonian captivity and the 70 weeks of Gentile age rule. So he says, as many nations shall come and say, come and let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So you see, this is very much millennial language. This kind of language is also going to be in Zechariah, I believe, or in Isaiah. I'm sorry, Isaiah 2:4. There you go. So he's actually saying the exact same thing Isaiah says. Who said it first, Micah or Isaiah? Probably Isaiah. That would be my guess, because this is in Isaiah 2:4, and that would be before Uzziah died. So he seems to be citing Isaiah's prophecy. And then he says, for they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none of them shall make him afraid, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. Again, that's going to be in Zechariah 3. He says, for all people will walk every one in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of our Lord our God forever and ever. So this is all millennial stuff. Now remember, in a couple chapters ago, we were talking about the Lord, the breaker coming forth. So you see how it keeps peppering in stuff that is about the Lord's second coming in with the stuff related to this Assyrian invasion. Why? And it's also in stuff related to the Babylonian captivity. Why? Because the ultimate end of these things is not when Christ comes the first time, it's when Christ comes the second time. They're in the Babylonian captivity until they look upon him whom he's pierced, and they mourn and they repent. Then God will save them. And God knows that's not going to happen until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in, because that was kind of a secret plan all along. And so he blinded them in part until the fullness of the Gentiles came in. And then when it comes along, they're going to really be at the end of their rope, because they're not going to have Christians in America propping them up and supporting them and getting their government to support them in order to trade for votes among Republicans, basically. They're going to be on their own, truly on their own, and realize, oh crap, we're toast. We can't manipulate our enemies against our other enemies anymore. This is what the Jews have always been doing. They don't love America. They have attacked America in the past, and America has betrayed them in the past. We're not really as friendly to Israel as we want people to think we are. They are very convenient for us, but it's usually the Republicans who support Israel, and usually most of the Jews vote Democrat. There is not a very clear Israel-American alliance going on that people want you to believe. Nor is Zion, the Zionists manipulating America. What it is a mix of ideas and interests, some religious, some geopolitical, that have us lending aid to Israel for self-interest. And sometimes that is helped by the fact that a large portion of America is dispensationalist and Christian Zionist. So don't fall for these things that act like Israel's controlling America, or that Israel's an American puppet, and or that we have these never-ending unity between us. Because we talk like that with England and other countries too. It's bullcrap. It's not true. This is just politicking. Okay, so don't fall for this stuff. You want to understand that when it comes down to it, in the last days, nobody is going to have any interest to side with Israel. It's basically going to be everyone against the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is going to be the only person who's like, I got your back, Israel. And he, like I said, he's probably going to come from Turkey, and he's going to take over everything up to the Euphrates and then down into Egypt. And then he's going to say to Israel, I'll protect you because I am your Messiah. And he's going to stand in the temple and claim to be his God. Nobody else is really going to be on his side until the Lord shows up. Now then he says, in that day, saith the Lord, I will assemble her that halteth, and her that is driven out, and her that I have afflicted. So this is talking about the Jewish remnant. In that day, notice he says, in that day. What is the day? This is the day that the nations don't learn war anymore. So that's the millennial great Sabbath, okay? So he says, he is going to assemble her and gather her. So this is where I kind of wrestle with Ezekiel 38 and 39, because Ezekiel 38 and 39 ends with him gathering them from every last place he's driven them. And this is where I genuinely struggle with, maybe parts of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is kind of fulfilled in Armageddon. Because it seems like the Jews are gathered after Ezekiel 38-39 war, and then there's a 70-year period after that, and then you go into the millennium. But it seems like during that 70-year period, you have them being dispersed again, taken captive. We see a third taken captive. And you probably have them, if the Antichrist is controlling Egypt, you probably have some of them fleeing to Egypt for security. So that's probably why he's saying he's going to gather them out of Syria and Egypt, because those are the ones who have fled down here to security, and the ones who have been taken captive up here by the kings of the east are then regathered again. So the final total regathering of the Jews is ultimately the millennium, which is why he's saying in that day, and he's referring to no one learning war anymore. So he says, And thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold, the daughter of Zion, unto thee it shall come, even the first dominion. In other words, you'll be the number one nation. And the kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. That's the Lord reigning over the world from Jerusalem. And why dost thou cry out loud? Is there no king in thee? Is thy counselor perished? For pangs have taken thee like a woman in travail. When does this happen? Well, when is Jerusalem in travail? When do we see a woman in travail? Revelation 12, which the woman gives up, if you remember, it's the body of Christ, basically. And so what's happening? The last advocates for Israel just got raptured. Crap. You're toast now, okay? So they're travailing. There's no king. Why? The Antichrist has been struck down by a bolt of lightning. Their counselor has perished. For pangs have taken thee like a woman in trial. So you're in the middle of the tribulation right here. And he says, Be in pain and labor and bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail. For now shalt thou go forth out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, and thou shalt go even to Babylon. Now I want to see what they say for 2 here. So you see the phrase "go to Babylon" is uvaat ad Babel. Okay, so this could be unto or as far as. It's like the word ice, which can sometimes mean toward, or it can sometimes mean to. Now, in this context, where Israel loses their king and they go to Babylon, that's what's going to happen in the ancient past. This is what is going to happen. You see Isaiah prophesying that after Hezekiah. So I would expect these prophecies are in the days of Hezekiah, and he's a second witness to what Isaiah is saying to Hezekiah. But in the last days context, they might be going toward Babylon, which is Neam, which is the direction they would head to get to Basra. And there shalt thou be delivered. So they are going to be delivered from the 70 weeks in Babylon by Cyrus. Remember, he's called Koresh, my anointed. And then they're going to be delivered at Basra from the Lord, which is going to be in the direction of Neam, which I believe is Mystery Babylon. So this could mean go to Babylon or go towards Babylon. I would assume ice can sometimes mean towards, but it usually means unto. That is the best word, even though it's kind of an old English word, unto, that suffices in all the different usage of ice. It can be for, it can be unto, it can be toward, into sometimes. But unto is kind of that neutral middle word that best represents ice, and it probably is the same word for this odd as far as. So anyways, he says, Now also many nations are gathered against thee. Let her be defiled, and let our eye look upon Zion. So the many nations gathered against thee, obviously in the ancient past, is going to be Babylon and her allies. In the last days, it's going to be the kings of the east and all their allies. And they know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel, for he shall gather them as sheaves into the floor. Now remember what Jesus says when he, in the last days, when he's coming, he's saying, gather all the tares together in bundles to be burned. So these are sheaves into the floor. What are these? When you are gathering wheat, you gather it all up into sheaves. Then it goes through a beating process or a chopping process where they're going to take the heads of the wheat off, and then the stalks they're going to burn. They're going to be big bundles of hay, and they're either going to feed those to their animals or they're going to burn them. Okay, well, in this case, Jesus talks about gathering the tares to be burned, or the wheat and the chaff. The wheat goes into his barn, and the chaff goes to be burned. Okay, so he says, he will gather them as sheaves to the floor. So in other words, The gathering, they think, is them coming up against Jerusalem to destroy it, but it's the Lord gathering them to destroy them all at once, so he can take out all the armies of the earth and rule the whole world in peace. That's his goal. So he says, "Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion." So this is the threshing floor where this is happening. "For I will make thine horn iron, and I will make thine hoofs brass." So remember, this is going to be in Malachi 5, where it says they're going to go out as calves in the stall and dance around the ashes of their feet after the chaff is burned. "And thou shalt beat into pieces many people, and I will consecrate their gain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth." So basically, the riches of the nations are going to go up into the New Jerusalem, which is going to be the Ark 2.0 at the end of the millennium. Okay, so this is what's going to happen, and this prophecy is its ultimate. It has a dual fulfillment too. It's going to have a part fulfillment when the nations are made and their eyes melt in their sockets and all that stuff, and Israel's going to go conquer all the surrounding nations, and they're going to be the preeminent nation of the world in the millennium. And then at the end of the millennium, the whole world's going to be burned down, and they're going to be set down on a new earth, and we're going to start all over with good stuff, no sin this time. So he says, "Now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He has laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel on the rod of the cheek." So remember the context in which this stuff is happening. If this is up to the days of Hezekiah, Assyria is literally gathering against them and besieging them. And then he says, "And they shall smite the judge of Israel on the rod of the cheek." Okay? This is not Christ. He is not the judge of Israel. The word for judge is, well, here is Shaphat. That's interesting. Pronounce, sentence, by implication, vindicate, punish, accessor, governor, passively litigate, judge. So remember, the word Dan means judgment. But Shaphat is used here. So, but the judge of Israel is going to be the Antichrist, who is struck with a rod upon the cheek. The rod is going to be the bolt of lightning that comes from the Lord's mouth and takes him out. Okay? But in the ancient past, it is going to be the king of Israel being taken captive or subjugated by the king of Babylon. Because remember, in Hezekiah's thing, this doesn't happen. It's going to happen to the puppet kings that are going to be in there in that last generation after Josiah. So you remember, Egypt's going to set up a puppet king, then Babylon's going to take him and set up their own puppet king, and then finally they're going to take him into captivity. So, so that's, remember how it says, "You have no king, where's your king? You're going to go captivity to Babylon." Okay, so that's how they lose their king. That's the judge of Israel. But this is also going to have a second meaning with the Antichrist. Now we're going to have Christ. "But thou, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall come forth unto me who is to be ruler in Israel." So notice we say judge of Israel. Judge is not a king. They're a temporary, and the ruler is going to be permanent. "Whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting." So obviously this is Christ. He came forth from old. He's the word of the Lord, the Bar Elohim. From everlasting. He is Olam. He is Olam. He's eternal. Yom Olam. See, so this says Yom is day, everlasting, from the everlasting day. He is from the eternal day. In other words, eternity is one day. Eternity is everything. It's where Christ was before and after. So he's goings forth is from of old, the eternal day. He's the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. I love it. Yom Olam. I'm learning Hebrew on a book and also on Rosetta Stone right now. So I'm getting more and more fluent in the concepts and the grammar and stuff like that. And hopefully I'll eventually be like fully fluent in Greek and Hebrew, and maybe Akkadian and Sumerian and half dozen other languages and be crazy like that. But right now I'm in process. So then he says, "Therefore he will give them up until the time that when she has travaileth has brought forth." So when is Israel done being in captivity? When she that travails has brought forth. Remember how it says she's going to travail and then go into the field? That's in Revelation 12, where the woman travails and goes in the wilderness, is nourished for 3.5 years. That's when Israel is no longer going to be given up. In other words, that's when they look upon him who they pierce and they mourn. And that's when they go into captivity, or into Basra, into the field, and they run and hide. And it says, "Then the remnant of his brethren," that's the Jews, "shall return to the children of Israel." Shall return to the children of Israel. Well, the children of Israel at this point are the church. Remember, they're not all Israel who are of Israel, but those who believe in God and after Christ came in Christ are the children of Israel. Israel is a type of Christ. So the remnant of his brethren, which would be the ethnic Jews, are going to return to the body of Christ. And then he says, and he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord Most High. Remember how the Lord is going to return to his place until they acknowledge their offense? Well, here he's saying, he will stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord is God, and they shall abide. They shall remain. They shall remain. Who? The children of Israel. He, that's the Lord, is going to stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. So in other words, he's going to be chilling up in heaven, just waiting, just being awesome, in the majesty of the Lord his God, and they shall abide. Why? Because we are in him. We are in him. The church is in him when he is in heaven. And for now, he shall be great unto the ends of the earth. So what's happening? Until he's great to the ends of the earth, in other words, until the gospel of Jesus Christ being the Messiah, being the Savior, is spread to the ends of the earth, the church is going to remain. The children of Israel, which is the church, is going to remain also in the Lord God, but also here on earth, spreading his name to the ends of the earth. And then it says, this shall be the peace. So they think it means this one or this man, so they insert man here. I don't think that's correct. I could be mistaken. I always can be, especially when it comes to languages I am not fluent in. But this says, and he shall be the one of peace. This is the NRSV. This is the New American Standard. And he shall, and this one shall be our peace. Notice they insert one. I don't think any of these are right. I think take out man. I think it says, this shall be the peace. This shall be the peace, : When the Assyrian shall come into our land, and he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. So what's happening? Well, this isn't the real peace, okay? Right here, this is their false peace, thinking they've achieved peace and safety. But when he's saying, and this shall be the peace, : this is going to be the whole thing, okay? So let me tell you how the peace is going to come. This is essentially what the author is saying. This shall be the peace. Let me tell you how this peace is going to come, okay? So what he's saying is, until he's great till the end of the earth, then he's going to come, and the whole thing is about him getting them to this place where no one learns war anymore. And he's going to say that it's going to keep going on until he's made great through the end of the earth, and she has given birth. So in Revelation 12, when the woman gives birth, is right after it says that the Lord has taken his kingdom and begun to reign. It's literally like, if you take out the chapter breaks, it's like 2 sentences later. Okay? So, if you know this, the Lord is describing the last days for them now, and I want you to hear this, okay? He's saying, so this shall be the peace. This is how the peace is going to happen. When the Assyrian comes into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then we shall raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. This is Israel raising 7 of the 10 kings who rule the world to their side, and the 8th is one of the 7, a.k.a. the Antichrist, who goes into perdition, who becomes the image of the beast. Okay, this is what this is. The 7 shepherds, even 8 principal men, are the 7 kings, and one is an 8th and goes into perdition. That is that. Okay? That's the only other place you have 7, even 8 used in the Bible, except where it says, no, I think that's it. That's it. Those are the only places where 7, even 8 are used in the Bible. So anyways, and he says, and they shall lay waste the land of Assyria. So notice they've got 7 shepherds and the Antichrist on their side. One of them being the Antichrist is on their side. So that's why it's 7 and 8 principal men, because one becomes the image of the beast and they go into perdition, the beast and the image of the beast. 2 bodies. And he says, and they shall lay waste the land of Assyria with a sword. So notice it's not the Assyrian that is the Antichrist. The Antichrist is the 8th principal man. The Assyrian is the one coming against them that the Antichrist helps them defeat. This is Gog Magog. So they shall lay waste the land of Assyria with a sword, and the land of Nimrod with the entrances thereof, a.k.a. they will conquer Syria and Iraq. The land of Nimrod is Iraq. Remember, his Shinar or Babylon is right where Baghdad is. And Assyria is the Greek name for Syria. Syria and Assyria are the same thing. The difference is they have what was called Soel Syria, which is called the Hollow of Syria, which is what's on this side of the Euphrates River. And the rest, which is mostly between the Tigris and Euphrates River and somewhat on the other side, that's all Syria or Assyria. Remember, when you see Syria, the word underneath it is Aram, because they weren't called Syrians by the Hebrews; they were called Arameans. It's the Greeks that call them Syrians because they took the whole land of Assyria, which by then the Assyrians had pretty much fully absorbed the Arameans, and they call it all Syria. Okay. So when they come into their land, in other words, when the Gog-Magog invasion, which is the final iteration of the Assyrian, comes into their land, they're going to conquer Syria and Iraq. And it says, notice he says, in the entrances thereof. Well, where would you enter into the land of Shinar? The Euphrates River. In the entrances thereof. That's where that would be the crossing into their land. So even though you have the hollow of Syria, which is kind of between Damascus and the Euphrates River, that's kind of that space. The entrance into the land of the Assyrians was considered, remember, their original empire, if you look at it, was up here. That was their core, their capital, if you will. But then they would take all this stuff up to the Euphrates River, and they would have that for a while. So the entrances of the Assyrians' land, or the land of Nimrod, which is down here in Babylon, is, in order to get into it, you'd have to cross the Euphrates River. So what is he saying? He's saying, we shall lay waste the land of Assyria and the land of Nimrod in the entrances thereof, in other words, up to the Euphrates River. And he shall deliver us from the Assyrian when he comes into our land and when he is treaded within our borders. Okay, so when he says, and thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian when he comes into our land, when he treads in our borders. Now, it's the misinterpretation of this by guys like Chuck Missler and all the rest, because they have these really weird ideas that the Assyrian is the Antichrist, and that Gog is Turkey, which is, it's not. Gog is Goguryeo in North Korea. That this belief is that this is the Assyrian, and it's the Lord who's going to deliver them from the Assyrian. Sounds good until you keep reading. He says, and then the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people as dew from the Lord, as showers upon the grass, that tarrieth not for man or waiteth for the sons of men. AKA, the Israel is not going to be looking for consensus from the U.S. or the UN before they're going to go take and conquer, which is kind of the attitude they're getting more and more right now. They're not going to tarry for man or wait for the sons of men. In other words, they're not going to wait for approval for anyone else. They're just going to conquer what they want. And that's what they do. So they're going to conquer this. Then it says, and the remnant of Jacob. Now remember, when he's saying Jacob, he is usually referring to carnal, ethnic Israel. When he's saying Jacob, not Israel, okay? The remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles, as in the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest, and the young lion among the flocks of sheep, who if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth to pieces, and none can deliver. So this is who Israel is becoming right now. Okay, they're not there yet. This is post Gog Magog, where they become like this. So think the first half of Daniel's 70th week. Then he says, thine hand will be lifted up against thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off. They're kicking butt and taking names. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots. So who's the thy? The answer is Israel. So after they get all uppity and they're kicking butt and taking names on all their enemies, the Lord is going to cut off their chariots and just cut off their horses and their chariots. Why? The Lord will cut off the cities of thy land and throw down thy strongholds. The Lord is going to do it. I will cut off the witchcrafts out of thy land and shall have no more soothsayers. I promise you, there was witchcraft and soothsayers in Israel. I have seen the Israeli museum. It is full of idols. It is gross. It is disgusting. It is not a museum. It's a temple of idols. And they have this tiny little room off in a corner where they have Bible stuff. And it's mostly idols. They have all kinds of paganism going on there. It says, thy graven image I will cut off, thy standing image out of the midst of thee, thou shalt no more worship the work of thine hands. No more. Well, what are the idols in the work of their hands? It's the image of the beast. That's the ultimate idol, the ultimate work of their hands. I will pluck up thy groves out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy cities. I will execute vengeance in anger and fury upon the heathen, such as they have not heard. So first the Lord is going to punish Israel for all their idolatry. Remember, it's the time of Jacob's trouble. He's pouring out his wrath on Israel for their sin. And then he's executing his vengeance on the heathen because they're ultimately going to be joined with all the nations at Armageddon. Okay? So notice the subject of this, the remnant of Jacob, that is ethnic Israel, okay? This is not believing Israel going on. The believers of Israel are going to go off into the wilderness and run and hide. But the unbelieving of Jacob are going to stand with the Gentiles against the Lord ultimately, because they're going to get all uppity when they win the Gog-Magog invasion. And by then they're going to have AI bots killing everything. They're going to be super full of themselves. And the eighth principal man is the Antichrist in the image of the beast. That's the he that they're going to say that he helps, delivers us from the Assyrian. Why? What are they using right now to fight Hamas and Hezbollah? Technology. What is the image of the beast going to be? Transhuman technology. And that's what delivers them from the Assyrians, so they're going to trust in that to deliver them from the Lord as well. He's going to execute vengeance on them and the heathen. So he says in chapter 6, hear the word of the Lord, or hear now what the Lord says. Arise, contend thou before the mountains, and let the hills hear thy voice. Hear thee, O mountains, the Lord's controversy, and ye strong foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a controversy with his people, and he will plead for Israel. So notice he's got a problem with Israel here. He will plead for Israel. But he's pleading for them. At the end of all this is in Joel. Remember, he's going to sit on the valley of Jehoshaphat and plead there for his people Israel for dividing his land, okay? So when you look at what's before that, the Assyrian lines up with Joel 2 and Gog. This lines up with Joel 3. So he says, O my people, what have I done to thee, and wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. Notice he's pleading, in Joel, he says he's pleading for, let's actually look at Joel here, so I don't get this confused. Joel 3, he says, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will plead with them for my people and my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and divided my land. Okay, that's what he says. Notice here, in Micah, he says, for the Lord has a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel. Notice Israel's not repentant yet. O my people, what have I done to thee, and wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. For I brought thee up out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed thee out of the house of thy servants, and I sent before thee Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. O my people, remember how what Balak king of Moab consulted, and what Balaam the son of Beor answered him from Shittim unto Gilgal, that you may know the righteousness of the Lord. So remember when he tried to curse you, and the Lord, he could only bless you? Wherewith shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the Lord Most High? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, and the fruit for my body, for the sin of my soul? He has showed me, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. So that is going to be in... I for some reason I thought that that's quoted in the New Testament, but they don't have it cited here. But that is kind of said in Hosea chapter 12. So he says, the Lord's voice crieth unto the city, and the man of wisdom shall see thy name. Hear ye the rod, and who hath appointed it. So who is the rod? Hear ye the rod, and who hath appointed it? And are there yet the treasures of wickedness in the house of wicked, and the scant measure that is abominable? So the rod, I would assume, is Jesus. Who hath appointed the rod, I would assume, is Yahweh, or the Father, in that context. And he says, yet the treasures of wickedness in the house of the wicked, yet are there yet treasures of wickedness in the house of the wicked, and a scant measure that is an abominable. So the scant measure is like basically saying, you give me 2 pieces of silver, and I give you 2 measures of wheat. Well, I made the measure small. So they're always talking about, like, well, in this context, that means is justice is unjust, essentially. So they're measuring the law with partiality, and they're still executing the law unjustly. Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances and with the bag of deceitful weights? So in other words, the context of this, and I'm sure back then they were ripping people off in the marketplace too. The two tend to go hand in hand if you're morally wicked. But at the end of the day, what you're seeing is they're not listening to the voice of the Lord because they're using the law unjustly. And he says, for the rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth. Therefore also will I make thee sick in smiting thee, and make thee desolate because of thy sins. In other words, I'm going to smack the crap out of you until you're sick of your sins. I'm going to make thee sick in smiting thee, and make thee desolate because of thy sins. I'm going to make you sick and desolate by smacking the crap out of you until you're sick of your sins. He's a good father. Spanks his kids. Thou shalt eat but not be satisfied, and thy casting down shall be as in the midst of thee, and thou shalt take hold but shall not deliver, and that which thou deliverest I will give up with the sword. Thou shalt sow, but thou shalt not reap. Thou shalt tread the olives, and thou shalt not anoint thee with oil. And sweet wine, but thou shalt not drink wine. So in other words, you're going to lose all your crops and all the good stuff that you used to have because the Assyrians are going to take it all. You're just going to be serfs and slaves in your own land. And the statutes of Omri are kept, and all the works of the house of Ahab ye walk in their counsels. So Israel and Judah are still corrupted by the house of Omri and Ahab all these years later. That I should make thee a desolation, the inhabitants thereof a hissing, therefore ye shall bear the reproach of thy people. So they are still corrupted and affected by the idolatry and the unjust rule of the house of Omri all these years later. So he says, woe is me, for I am when they have gathered the summer fruits, as the grape gleanings of the vintage. There is no cluster to eat. My soul desired the first ripe fruit. Think about this. Jesus did not just lose his temper at the fig tree, okay? He shows up and he says, my soul desired the first ripe fruit. In other words, I want to see if the law has produced anything good in Israel. Has it? No. There's no figs on the fig tree. The law, remember what Adam and Eve covered themselves up with when they got caught for eating the fruit. This is their version of thinking they can become by God with knowledge, a.k.a. the law, versus with his spirit, a.k.a. obedience to him and trusting him. They covered themselves with fig leaves. And so Jesus comes up to the fig tree and finds only fig leaves on it, the same thing Adam and Eve used to try to cover their sin when they sinned and disobeyed God. No, that's not going to work. And my soul desired the first ripe fruit. Now, in this context, he's saying the summer fruit, the great gleanings of the vintage, and there's no cluster to eat. So he's using the fruit type of gleaning grapes, but it's the same concept. My soul desired the first ripe fruit. There's no fruit. There's no fruit on this tree. The good man has perished out of the earth, and there's none upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man with a net. They that do evil with both hands earnestly, the prince asketh, and the judge asketh for a reward, and the great man, he uttereth his mischievous desires. So they wrap it up. What do? They want to do something bad, and so they go to the priest and see if they can get his blessing for it, and they give him the blessing for it. And the best of them is a briar, and the most upright is sharper than a thorn hedge. Remember what happens if you don't bear fruit, but you bear thorns? This is Paul in Hebrews. The day of thy watchman, thy visitation cometh, and thou shalt be their prosperity. So Paul says in Hebrews 6, if you bear no fruit, but only thorns and thistles, you are you're near to being burned and nigh unto cursing. Okay? So he's saying, now's the day. Now's the day of your visitation. What's going to happen with the chaff in that day? They're going to get burned. So he's telling the Jews who are lined up with the heathen. Remember, there's going to be in Israel, there's going to be a remnant of Israel, including the Jews who flee when the Lord touches down, and including the Jews who flee at the abomination of desolation. But there's also going to be some that are honestly probably going to remain on the side of the Antichrist thinking he's going to save them. Because there's just a lot of Jews that are just secular and unbelieving. They don't care about God at all. They're atheists or pagans. Then there's ones that are self-righteous and deceived, and then there's ones that are ignorantly deceived. It's not necessarily their attitude that is the reason that they follow false doctrines. It's just everything they know. And we have Calvinists and Catholics and you name it, other denominations that do the same thing among Christianity as well. They just follow what they've been told. They don't think and get their doctrine from God. Anyways, trust ye not in a friend, put ye not confidence in a guide. As I was just saying, keep the doors of thy mouth from the lies in thy bosom. Keep the doors of thy mouth from the lie from her that lieth in thy bosom. Oh, let me take that back. Keep the doors of thy mouth from her that lieth in thy bosom. The doors of thy mouth. This sounds like what James is saying is like, if your heart deceives you, don't speak it out and deceive your heart. Sounds like it. But he says, for the son dishonoreth the father, the daughter rises up against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies are men of his own house. This is what Jesus said he would make it like that, though. Remember? He says, I'm going to make a mother against father and a daughter-in-law against mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be them of his own household. Jesus said he will make it that way. Keep the doors. So this sounds like what James is saying. This sounds like what Jesus is saying here. And it sounds like he's saying, don't follow your family. Don't follow your tradition. Follow God. Therefore I will look unto the Lord, and I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light upon me. Remember how he's going to say about when Jesus comes to Naphtali, he's going to say, them who dwelt in great darkness have seen a great light. He's going to show himself to them who did not seek him. When I fall, I shall arise. Remember what Jesus says about him being the rock. Those who fall on it will be broken into pieces, but those who he falls on will be crushed to dust. So what do we want to do? We want to fall on Jesus. We want to lay down our lives, fall back in baptism, die to ourselves, and arise. When I fall, I shall arise. This is baptism being described here. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light to me. You're being buried with him in the darkness, and you're being raised into the light. So he's literally describing you guys. Stop following your tradition and follow the gospel and be saved and follow the Lord himself. I will bear the indignation of the Lord because I have sinned against him. So you're taking responsibility for your sin until he plead my cause, until Jesus Christ is the one who saves you. And execute judgment for me. He will bring me forth into the light, and I will behold his righteousness. In other words, he's going to raise me from the dead if I trust in him. Then she that is mine enemy shall see it, and shame shall cover her, which said to me, where is the Lord thy God? Mine eyes will behold her. Now shall she be trodden as the mire in the streets. Who is the she that's going to be trodden? Well, if you remember, he brought up the house of Ahab. Well, that was Jezebel in that case. But who is the she that this is talking about in the ultimate end time sense? It's the whore of Babylon. The whore of Babylon is the one saying, where is thy God? She's offering herself as an alternative to the church. So the she that deceives his heart, it sounds like he says, do not keep the doors of thy mouth from her that lieth in thy bosom. My guess is something about this having to do with making an oath unto the Antichrist or deceiving your heart by believing and repeating what she says. I don't know. I don't know why the she in lieth in thy bosom. I don't understand, because lying could mean like a woman laying on your chest, or it could be like lying, like telling a falsehood. So I don't know. He says, in that day thy walls are to be built, and in that day thy decree be far removed. In that day he shall come even to thee from Assyria, and from the fortified cities, and from the fortress even to the river, and from sea to sea, and from mountain to mountain. So he says, in that day that thy walls are to be built, in that day the decree shall be far removed. So the law is going to be removed. It's going to be taken away. In that day also he will come from Assyria, and the fortified cities, from fortress to the river. So it says, in that day he shall come even to thee. So he is the body of Christ coming to thee from all these places from far away. Notwithstanding, the land shall be desolate because of them that dwell therein, and the fruit of thy doings. The Jews are going to be toast. Feed thy people with the rod and the flock of thine heritage. So remember this, him coming from Assyria and all the fortified cities is going to be their in their ancient fulfillment. But then the secondary fulfillment is going to be the church coming from all the nations, while the Jews are going to be desolate. In other words, Jerusalem's going to be destroyed for the fruit of their doings, rejecting Christ. Feed thy people with thy rod, the flock of thine heritage, which dwell solitarily in the wood, in the midst of Carmel, and let them feed in Bashan and Gilead as in the days of old. I don't know why it says dwell solitarily in the wood. I don't know if that's like dwelling in the wilderness. I don't think so. Thy rod, I would assume, would be, it could be the rod of the Lord's chastening, but Jesus is ultimately the subject. And all this Carmel, Bashan, Gilead is up in the region around the Golan. So why does he specifically mention that? I don't know. But he says, according to the days of thy coming out of the land of Egypt, I will show unto him marvelous things. So it seems to be second coming things that are like that. And the nations will see and be confounded in all their might. They shall lay their hand upon their mouth, and their ears shall be deaf. Hear no evil, speak no evil. They shall lick the dust like a serpent. They shall move out of their holes like worms of the earth. They shall be afraid of the Lord our God, and shall fear because of thee. So this is the ultimate. These people are either going to go underground, which happens to a remnant in the millennium, or they're going to, if you remember other prophecies in Isaiah, how it says they're going to lick the dust of your feet. In other words, they're going to bow down and grovel before you. And shall be afraid of the Lord your God, and fear because of thee, because the Lord is going to be the ruler of Israel. And they're going to be the primary nation. Who is a God like unto thee, that pardoneth iniquity, and passeth by the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? He retains not his anger forever, because he delights in mercy. So ultimately, this is for the salvation of the Jews, but it's going to be a lot of filtering, and it's a remnant that's going to be saved. There's going to be a lot of filtering and judgment. He will turn again, and he will have compassion on us. He will subdue our iniquities. He subdues them. How? By the rod. Or in other words, by the chastening relationship of coming into Christ and being adopted as a son. And thou wilt cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. In other words, he's going to remember them no more. Thou wilt perform the truth to Jacob and the mercy to Abraham, which thou hast sworn unto our fathers in the days of old. This is actually quoted by John the Baptist's dad. He is going to say, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers and remember his holy covenant, the oath which he swore to our father Abraham. That's what John is going to be forecasting. So ultimately, this is a short book, but it contains a lot of convoluted narratives that are going to jump back and forth between the first coming, the second coming, the destruction of Jerusalem under Babylon, the captivity of Jerusalem to Babylon, the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, the captivity of the Jerusalem to the nations. It's going to cover Assyria and Gog-Magog. It's going to cover stuff having to do with Daniel's 70th week, both the first and the second half, all in 7 chapters. It's a very weighty book. It's right up there with like Joel 2, but probably more information in it. So you're going to want to read this, and you're going to carefully just siphon through one thing and just remember these little things like, oh, the first he saw fruit on it, and then there's none. Okay, you want to let the Holy Spirit let you make those connections and be like, oh, okay, it's not the easiest book to just sever up and be like, this is this and this and this and this. Because like many prophecies, as we showed in Isaiah, sometimes it's the same sentence, and it's like that part's about the first coming, that part's about the second coming, that part's about the Babylonian captivity, that's about the destruction in 70 AD. And the only way you can know this is if you can know the geography and the cities and the specific things that are part of one prophecy but not part of the other, and vice versa. It takes a lot. So, but if you have a complete narrative of how this stuff's going on, and again, my Revelation book gives you a pretty good timeline for the eschaton, and it's going to cite these prophecies where they're relevant. You can go back and look at that framework and look at this and be like, oh, okay, Babylonian, ancient, first coming, second coming, millennium. You can start to see it in time, and that was my purpose in writing that book, is to take what the Holy Spirit was giving to me over lots and lots of Bible reading and kind of package it in ways that not necessarily gives you like a systematic, but like kind of a hermeneutic at least on how to interpret prophecy, and then using that framework to kind of dissect these things and show you where they go in a timeline order. So that's it. That's the 7 chapters of Micah. I'm going to stop there because that's a weighty book. And then in the next one, I'm probably going to try to do Nahum and Zephaniah, which both seem to prophesy the immediate destruction of Assyria before it happens. So if you remember, it's going to be like 100 years after this that Assyria gets destroyed. And so Nahum and Zephaniah both seem to predict that. Zephaniah also talks about the Babylonian captivity a little bit, but they're both just 3 chapters long. So I'm going to try to do those in one pop. And then after that, we'll probably do like Habakkuk and Jeremiah. So probably Jeremiah first. Habakkuk seems to mostly focus on the captivity, the rise of Babylon, and he doesn't really talk about the captivity of Babylon, but just how Babylon's evil and being used to judge Israel. So I would assume that would be towards the end of Jeremiah's prophesying, or potentially after. So I'll probably do Jeremiah first, then Habakkuk. And then after that, we're going to go and do Ezekiel and Daniel. Probably that's tough. It's tough to know which one to do first, because I might go back and forth on those, because Ezekiel, some of it's definitely, he mentions Daniel 3 times, so he knows of Daniel. So some of the earlier parts of Daniel, but Daniel's an OG for like 70 years himself. So, and then after that, we're going to have Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, which are going to be in the context of Ezra and Nehemiah. So by that time, we're going to start back over in Chronicles, revisit the history, and then lead that right up to Ezra and Nehemiah, and then get these last prophets down. So all this, again, 3 to 6 months will probably be done, and then we'll be in the New Testament. A week or two, possibly by this weekend, will I have my Apostles' Teaching fully posted. Again, I keep telling people this. I see people who are buying it. I'm not going to give you a new copy if you keep buying it and I tell you not to buy it. The book that is there, that is published, it takes time to unpublish it and republish it and go through all this stuff. And so I published to get myself a hard copy so that I could hand do final edits in, and that's taken a little longer than I thought. I thought I would be done a few weeks ago, but I'm not yet. So I am in my final read through, and I'm halfway through the Gospel of John, so I've just got basically John's letters in the book of Revelation after that, and I'm done. And I could be done this week, but I'm trying to be very careful to get as close to the Greek as I can and give you guys a good read. So please don't buy it until I say, and then I'll have a full-on release video for that book. And then as we're doing the New Testament, I will have a regular commercial for that book, because I would like you guys to buy that. I would like you guys to study with me out of the text that I wrote, because that's what I'm going to be reading out of. And I don't expect it to be your preferred biblical text, but it's my best interpretation of the text. So and then I'm going to keep going on my Serpent by the Way stuff. This Friday I'm probably going to have some stuff, because I actually just went through the Popol Vuh and made all the connections between that and the pre-Genesis stuff. So we'll try to do some Serpent by the Way stuff this Friday. And other than that, you guys have a great rest of your week. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.